Welcome to the Generation Kids Daily Devo podcast, where we move from wonder to worship, looking for God at work in the world around us, ready to ask the tough questions and discover what His Word has to say to us. Today's episode is titled Love 40, and it comes from me, Casey Taylor. From the time I was going into the third grade, all the way up until literally the day I graduated high school, I lived in the same apartment with my mom, smack dab in the middle of our apartment complex. Now, most of my friends had houses on streets in the middle of neighborhoods, but my house, our second-story apartment, was sitting on top of someone else's apartment, and it shared stairs with our neighbors who would go right to their apartment while we went left, and their apartment unit was stacked on top of someone else's. So take that setup and multiply it by several hundred, and that was essentially our apartment complex, with a revolving door of new faces every year or so. We'd have new kids come and then go. I'd have friends for a season, and then I'd never see some of them again. As hard as it was living in such an ever-changing environment, one of the things that was awesome was that I got to meet so many different types of people from so many different places all over the world who'd spent seasons of their lives also sharing the apartment complex with my mom and I. Sometime around my 6th to 7th grade year, a guy started coming to our apartment complex once a week to offer free tennis lessons at the apartment tennis courts to anyone who was interested in learning. And I still don't know exactly why, other than to share the love of tennis with us, and maybe the apartment paid him a little bit to offer something fun to his residents. But for whatever the reason was that he came, many of us took him up on the free lessons, and I learned that I loved to play tennis. I loved learning all the different shots that you could use at any given time, like different clubs in a golf bag. Each shot had its distance and purpose and specific timing to use. It was like a full-body chess match as you ran and swung and ran some more to try and outwit and outplay your opponent across the length of the court. Once a month or so, Dave, our tennis instructor, would hold an apartment-wide tennis tournament. But it might as well have been a Junior Olympics. We had a Russian kid named George, my best friend from Bosnia named Adi and his brother Dino, an African-American kid who only briefly lived in our apartments, but his name was Rajan, and several other adults from India, America, and somewhere in the Middle East that I can't quite remember. When we all played each other, it was interesting to see the difference in how we all handled winning, losing, frustration, and joy. Sometimes, the different ways we played drove the other people nuts. But one of the lessons my tennis instructor taught us at the end of one of the tournaments that I happened to lose in the final to George, the Russian kid, really stuck with me. I'd been so frustrated that I couldn't understand George when he and his dad were talking strategy during our match. It felt like cheating, and really, I was just upset that I'd started to lose after having started off so well. But the match made me feel like we were so far apart in who we were because of the language difference, the cultural differences, and even as one of us, George, won and the other, me, lost. Dave asked us to look around, to see all the different competitors on the court, how different all of our backgrounds were, where we were born, the lives that we'd lived, and the languages we spoke. And then he said, but when we're on this court, we're all equals, sharing the same court, the same ball, and playing the same game together. Even though one will lose and another one will win, in each match, the fact that we come together and push each other and make each other better, this is why tennis is so beautiful. It brings us together where we were once so far apart in many different ways. This story came to my mind today when I thought of today's verse in Matthew 5, verse 9.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Matthew 5:9.
Life, just like sports, can feel like a competition for space, for resources, for limited spots to succeed, even for physical space, for money, for attention, for so many things. When life feels like sport, and like we have to fight to come out on top, we stop seeing those across the court, or across from us in our cities, our country, or our world as people, and we start seeing them as competitors. Us versus them. One winner, one loser. This isn't how the kingdom of God works. In fact, our passage today reminds us that those who fight for peace for all men and women, that the Bible calls peacemakers, will have the blessing of being called sons and daughters of God. In Jesus, God the Father broke down the dividing walls of His kingdom and His family so that all who weren't Israelites, who the Bible calls Gentiles, that's you and me probably, would have a place with Him. He made a way for all the diversity and uniqueness to be included in what he calls his family. When we follow in Jesus' footsteps and share the good news that God's kingdom is for everyone who would believe, regardless of where you come from, regardless of what you've done, how you look, if you've won or if you've lost, there is space for you. God tells us that, just like Jesus, we too can be called his sons and daughters. What we share as image bearers of God is so much more important than what makes us different. Don't let us versus them keep you from remembering the blessing of bridging the gap to others, just like Jesus bridged that gap between us and the Father by bringing peace to sinners like us through his sacrifice on the cross.
Now it's time for
Today's Big Question!
Today's big question is, have you ever thought that you might be the bad guy in someone else's story? What would you think if I told you that you might not have to have done anything to earn that title other than being different? What do you think you'd have to do to change someone's mind about you? In a way, this is the challenge and the opportunity of the peacemaker. How can you show the character of Jesus in a way that disarms others' negative view of you and displays the magnetic love of Jesus? What might being a peacemaker, for the sake of being called a son or daughter of God, do to change their minds? Thanks for listening to the Generation Kids Daily Devo podcast. If you want to keep in touch with us on all our social media platforms, check out the links in the description. And if you'd like to help support us as we continue to create meaningful content for kids of all generations, please subscribe to our Patreon by visiting us at patreon.com/wearegenerationkids.